We are live.
All right.
Good evening. I am so excited to see each and every one of you here on tonight. Welcome back to the Outliers Collective Bible Study. We are grateful that you are here tonight, whether you're joining us on Zoom or watching through your church's social media page. We are excited about your presence. Tonight is session 9, and we are diving into chapter 7 of Dr. Lisa Allen McLaurin's book, A Womanist Liturgical Theology. This chapter is called Liturgical Practice and Social Justice, and it asks us a question that is echoed through the African American church from Reconstruction to the present. What is the relationship? I am so excited to see each and every one of you here on tonight. This is an amazing time for us to gather. We have been having an awesome time as a part of our Outliers Collective Bible Study. And we are so grateful that you are joining us on this evening. Whether you are joining us live on Zoom or watching through your church's social media page, we look forward to a wonderful time this evening of engagement and education. Tonight is session 9, where we are diving into chapter 7 of Dr. Lisa Allen McLaurin's A Womanist Liturgical Theology. This chapter is called Liturgical Practice and Social Justice, and it asks us to reflect on an important question for the African American church today. What is the relationship between how we worship and what we do about injustice? Tonight, we're going to explore how the Black church has historically been a site of resistance and how our worship, our songs, our liturgy, our preached word have carried the seeds of liberation, even when the world around us demanded silence. From the establishment of independent denominations during the period of Reconstruction to the cultural awakening of the Harlem Renaissance, to the marches and freedom songs of our civil rights movement, the church has always and will continue to be the center. Dr. Allen McLaurin challenges us to think about a term which she titles Applied Christianity, meaning she suggests that faith doesn't just live in our hymn books, or it doesn't just live with us on Sunday mornings in the church space, but faith walks out the doors and into the streets of our community and larger society. So as we move through tonight's conversation, we want you to hold close to you this question. Does our worship compel us to justice, or does it allow us to remain comfortable? I'm excited about our facilitators who will be teaching us tonight. Let us welcome Reverend Dr. Reginald Williams Jr. and Reverend Dr. Joe Mitchell.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I hope all are well. Thank you, Dr. Danny, for leading us in as you have each and every week. And Joe, what's up, man?
Man, what's good, bro? Good to see you, man.
You too, man. You too. Ready to hit it?
Yeah, man. Well, really quick, my understanding is today is a special day for you.
Oh, I was gonna get to that later. And you know
Okay,
what?
cool.
That's such a gentleman of you. You're such a gentleman. Yes, today is the
I
day
try.
that on March 11th, Wednesday, March 11th, 1992, 18 gentlemen across the burning sands of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated at the school that sits atop the highest of seven hills there in Tallahassee, Florida. Founded on October 3rd, 1887. The school is named Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. And on that hill, there is a chapter of Alpha called the Beta Nu chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, founded by one of our jewels. And so, yeah, today Me and my LB celebrate 34 years of bonding and brotherhood. So thank you for acknowledging that. That's mighty black of you. That's mighty
Hey
black.
man, that's what I do, man. You know,
Appreciate
I, I,
you, man.
I made a better choice than you did, but I'm gonna let you celebrate your day today. You know what I'm
And here we go. And here we go. And here we go. And we
saying?
started
Nah,
off
happy anniversary, bro. Hey, we're
started
gonna
you
be cool
started
today.
off real good, and then you gotta go, That's all
Happy,
right. Okay.
happy anniversary, brother. Happy anniversary, brother. Let's hit it. Let's hit it. Let's hit
Let's
it.
hit it. With that, why don't you pray? I don't even know if we
Let's,
was gonna hit the ceiling, but why don't you open us up in prayer?
yes, sir. Creator, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity to come together as community, to learn and to wrestle, to better understand not only who you are, but what you've called us to be, and the actions that you have called the church to as well. Guide our thoughts, guide our tongues this evening. Let everything that we say and do be glorifying in your sight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I mean. Hey, so tonight, family, we are talking about liturgical practice and justice as we deal with this whole matter of a womanist theology of worship. We are looking at this whole matter of liturgical practice and justice. Let's talk about what justice is for a minute. Um, Recently we celebrated the life of Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson,
Yes.
the one who kept us saying keep hope alive, right? Um, and so I want to give a couple of definitions, a couple of word pictures of what justice is. Jesse Jackson said these words, um, and now speaks these words as a great ancestor.
Yep.
He says, if you have a size 9 foot and a size 6 shoe, trying to fit a size 9 foot into a size 6 shoe ain't gonna do nothing but hurt. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's not gonna do nothing but hurt your toes. There's nothing wrong with your foot. It's just that there's not a structure that fits
Yeah.
the foot that you have. And so when he talks about injustice, injustice is structures that do not fit the whole of humanity and the whole of all of those who need to have structures around them to protect them. Let's take it even further. That protect them, that keep them stable and sturdy.
Yep.
And that's what injustice really, really comes to. So that's one, and I wanted to make sure that we called his name, given much of the work that he did.
Absolutely.
Um, another lens into what justice is justice. There's a difference between charity and justice, right? So what we understand charity to be is when you are feeding someone, clothing someone, housing someone. Those are acts of charity and not justice. Justice is making sure that no one needs to be fed or needs to be clothed or needs to be housed, right? And so I think it was Bishop Oscar Romeo who said these words. He said, "If if I feed the hungry, you call me a saint.
Mm-hmm.
If I ask why they are hungry in the first place, you call me a communist in a negative way, right?" And so what justice seeks to do is to set up structures that make sure everybody is straight. Here's another illustration. So the difference between charity and justice is the difference between a thermostat and a thermometer.
Yep.
Shameless plug. You can find this in the book to serve this present age. Social Justice Ministry of the Black Church. Not the church, not something for another day. But
Yeah, I think I know the author of that book, I think.
yeah, I met him a couple times.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: the difference between charity and justice is the difference between thermostat and thermometer, right? A thermometer reads what's going on around it and reacts based on what it's reading going on around it, right? And so the mercury in the thermometer rises or falls based on temperature, based on reaction to what's going on around it. That's charity,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you see somebody hungry, okay, you're reacting, you're giving them something to eat. You see somebody who's naked, you're reacting, you're giving them clothes, right? Justice is a bit different. Justice is a thermostat. The thermostat sets the temperature
Yep.
so that no one is too hot nor too cold. That's the work of justice, to set the temperature, to set the atmosphere so that no one is too hot nor too cold. With the caveat being, you need both at the same time. You need charity and you need justice given the world that we live in. So when you think about those types of pieces, that's kind of a turn the structural part of Reverend Jackson between the difference between thermostat and thermometer. You think about that, and then when you get to the scripture, because this is Bible study night,
It
right?
is Bible.
International Negro Bible Study. The word used in biblical text many times for justice is the word mispat, mispat, right? Mispat. And what mispot means is bringing forth an atmosphere so that right relationships are established between all who need to have them, right? When scripture says, and we're going to talk about some of this next week, me and Mark, but when it says, let justice roll down like waters, righteousness like an, that word is mispot, and mispot means the promotion of personal, public, and political policies and practices which ensure the wellness of all, not just some, not just those who are privileged,
Right.
not just those who are elite, but all, ensuring the promotion of personal, public, and political policies and practices which ensure the wellness of all, right? It's concerned about relationship between God, the human family, and the environment. So when you talk about letting justice roll down like waters, righteousness like an ever flowing stream, again, we're gonna deal with that next week a little bit more. But that's what justice is. And so for Dr. Lisa Allen McLaurin to identify the need um, to link our liturgical practice and justice is huge and says a lot about the fact that, watch this, sometimes in churches we are not practicing what we profess. We are not engaging. We can call for justice outside, but we're not engaging in justice inside, starting with our liturgical practices, and we can go other places with it, right? How
Right.
you gonna call for justice and outside of the church, and you're not being just to the people who are inside the church, whether they are same gender loving, whether they are women, whether they are young folks? How are we engaging in justice practices and engagement inside that mirrors and links what we're doing on the outside?
Man, that's good, bro. You said a mouthful with that introduction. I've also heard it said before too, bro. If if we had more justice, we would need less charity, right?
Come on,
If
that's
if
good.
if if we had more people committed to doing things that are just, that are right, that are moral, then we would need less charity, right? We would need to feed less people with our food pantries
Yeah,
if we
that's
were
right.
ensuring more people were getting paid a living wage, right? That's
Yeah,
justice, right?
that's
And the
right.
act of justice reduces the need of charity. But man, you said a mouthful, man. That's good, and I think you hit on something that I think we all need to be looking internally at our churches, and we need to have honest conversation around. Right? We can't. We're not practicing what we're professing, right? We can do all this work outside of the church as it relates to justice, but we also have to look inside of our churches and say what practices, what's in our polity that is not just, and we really need to rethink those things to ensure that we're not hypocritical as the church, and we're demanding something outside the church that we're not even doing inside of the church, and that's important work. To your point, Dr. Allen kind of kicks off this chapter, really linking together this idea of Black church worship and justice, right? And she even links to the point of understanding as worshipers, what we engage in is really prophetic resistance, right? When we think
Hmm.
about our prayers and our songs and our preaching and our dance, all those things are linked together as part of prophetic witness, right? Prophetic resistance. Those things that we're doing are part of who we are and the prophetic work that we're striving to do as congregations, right? And interesting enough, here's also something interesting. Black worship has a way of addressing what's happening to Black people, right?
Yeah.
In our worship on Sunday, we have a way of speaking about and speaking to what we're dealing with on a daily basis outside of the church. I think you said something to the fact, and I'm paraphrasing, right? What we go to church so that we can build ourselves up spiritually for what we're dealing with socially, right?
Mhm.
We're filling the tank spiritually because we're dealing with some hell socially, and that's what becomes part of our worship experience, right? And it really goes back to African cosmology, right? And really understanding this worldview that's centered around relationship and kinship, right? This whole idea of us being communal, right? I think the brothers talked about it last week when they were breaking down this idea of white evangelicalism being very individual. But when we talk about who we are as part of the African diaspora, right? What we do is communal. It's not just me, it's us,
Right.
right? It's not I think therefore I am. It's I am because we are, right? It's a very different way of understanding how we engage and how we understand justice. And it's part of our identity, right? It's part of how we identify as members of the African diaspora, or the term Dr. Allen uses is Africans in America, right? It's part of who we are, and it's integrated into our communal identity,
Yeah.
right? Many of us grew up in communities where anybody could get at us, right? Matter of fact, before we even got home, Mama already knew what we had did at the park, right?
That's all.
There was several times I came around the corner. My daddy was sitting on the porch with the belt around his neck, and I knew it was on. He had already got the phone call that his son was cutting up because we had this village mentality, right? All of the kids are our kids. We look after each other. We look after the kids. We look after our elders, right? That's all part of this idea of truly understanding justice as part of our communal commitment to each other as well. And we're all God's children, right? You kind of mentioned it before with the justice that we need to look inside of the church and what we're doing, right? We're all God's children, you know, right? Even those who love differently than we may love, those who may look different than who look, whatever your social economic status, we are all God's children. That really has to be the foundation of how we understand justice and what we do as it relates to justice work, right? Not just me, but it's us. It's all of us, right?
Yeah. So some of this was not some of this, but kind of this kind of ethos of justice resistance has been, and we're not going to stay here too long,
Yeah.
but has been shown throughout the different um, denominational affiliations, through different eras that we have gone through. So I'm gonna just make mention of a couple,
Cool.
particularly as it relates to denominations in terms of resistance for justice. So if you think about the AME Church and Richard Allen, they were worshiping, I believe, in St. George's there in Philly, where they had to sit in the balcony,
Yep.
right? Richard Allen comes down, I believe, to get communion or to pray. He comes down to get communion, and they literally drag him out.
Off his knees.
Drag him out, right?
Yep.
Drag him out because he was not white and because they were racist, right?
Yep.
Drag him out. He and I believe George Loud, matter of fact, Marcus Small said they called the balcony nigga heaven, right?
Yeah.
So he comes down out of there, comes to the
Okay.
front of the church, and they drag him out. He goes on to start AME, the AME denomination, and begins what is known as Mother Bethel now there in Philadelphia.
Yep.
Side note, even as we talk about justice, right? We also have to be discerning and cognizant of the models which we internalize from others and then just put a black face on it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm John, if I got John Kenny in my ear. Because if we are internalizing the hierarchicalization of other models just to say that we put it and made it black, then we're doing as much, if not even more, damage
Damage.
to what it means to bring that Ubuntu that you were talking about, to bring that all of that in, right? And so we get these levels, and so that's a whole nother piece. So you got the AME church that was there. Then you got AME Zion that came.
Yep.
All of these were churches that were stations on the Underground Railroad. And so you got to look at some of that. Then you got Black Baptist resistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Write this name down: James Melvin Washington. He is a historian of the Black church and Black people. James Melvin Washington. I believe he died in 1997, somewhere around there. Used to be a Union Theological in New York. But James Melvin Washington has a number of different books that help to deal with um, 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 Black people's history. He has a book on prayers that is awesome, right? But particularly for this conversation, he deals with Black Baptists that were beginning Baptist denominations at the end of the Civil War. You got to think about National Baptists. That's like late 1890s, as a way to have a voice in a denominational space. And the power of denomination can be that you got different churches working for the same thing, right?
Absolutely.
Some recently have come away from denominationalism, but that's another conversation
Yep.
for another day.
Hey,
Yeah,
hey, bro,
National
real
Baptist.
quick.
Go ahead.
I think it's important too that we mention as we talk about specifically Black Baptists, right? One of the tools that we had was the newspaper, right? We talk about after the Emancipation Proclamation, we're establishing some things, we're establishing denominations. We also established some printing presses, right? And part of the
Absolutely.
way that we got our messages out before the internet and cell phones and social media, right, was with newspaper, right? And that's kind of how we get the introduction as well to the amazing Ida B. Wells, who was a
Yeah.
writer for a Black Baptist publication. But I didn't mean to cut you off. Keep
No,
flowing.
no, ain't no thing. You got that's a great point. You got Ida B. Wells, the National Baptist magazine. Prior to that, you got Frederick Douglass with
Yep.
the North Star. You have
Yep.
all of these different publications that are going out that from people who are grounded in church and getting this message of freedom, liberation, and justice out. Right. So you got and so stay with the Baptist for a minute before I go to another one. But even in the Baptist National Baptist 1895
Mhm.
had another National Baptist who came after that. But then you have Dr. King, Gardner Taylor, who are in the National Baptist Convention, but had to separate in order to have a denominational home for the work that they were doing around justice, right?
Yes.
And so
Progressive.
that's how the Progressive National Baptist Church gets started. Hey, around 61, 62, I believe,
Yep.
because they needed a denomination. They wanted to have a denominational home to engage in that. So you see how all of and because um, there were those who were in the National Baptists who did not want to ruffle feathers as it came to justice. So I am in Chicago, Illinois. I went to Olivet Baptist Church Nursery School. Olivet was pastored by the Reverend J.H. Jackson. J.H. Jackson, who Dr. Gardner Taylor said were public enemies but private friends with the King family. J.H. Jackson was so beholden to Richard Daley that he said something like, "Give us this day our Daley bread," because Daley was the mayor of Chicago, and when King came, he didn't find any support. He didn't find much support in many of the cities that he went to. As a matter of fact, Amos Wilson told not Amos Wilson, Amos Wilson,
You're right.
Amos Wilson. That's not Amos Wilson. Amos Brown, former pastor of Third Baptist Church, San
Yes, in
Francisco,
California. Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
California.
Yep,
Amos
yep.
Brown told
Aaron
me and
Clark.
Earl Fisher, he said people talking about when Dr. King came to town, it was only 10% of the people who would follow King and the rest didn't want to mess with him because they were scared. Amos Brown said it wasn't 10%. He said it was more like 3%, right? And
Yep.
so part of even here in Chicago, that's why in Chicago where you have folks who are beholden to empire and will not. There are some who are beholden to empire, like Jackson was, and then some who will not bow to empire. Right? You probably heard over this past weekend. Um, Clay Evans, founder of Fellowship Missionary
Fellowship.
Baptist Church, who was succeeded by Charles Jenkins, now pastored by Dr. Reverend Reginald Wayne Sharp, and who had as a member Jesse Lewis Jackson, right? They had nothing but beams up after beginning to build their church where they are now, 45th and Princeton. They had nothing but beams up for 7 years. Why?
Still
Because
pay money.
because because Clay Evans allowed King to come and preach in the fellowship, and after that, Daly shut down all of the other
Financing.
kinds of permits and all these
Yep.
different types. They put it up 7 years, and then one of the things that helped them to get the church to be built was Jesse Jackson putting his name on some loans that allowed the church to be built. So you have these tensions, particularly with justice and churches, and then if we go further in, as she's talking about tonight, justice and liturgy,
Yep.
right? And so you got all of these different types of pieces in terms of the connections of justice, without people understanding what justice is and the resistance there too. That's I went way off script, so I'm
It's
trying
all
to come
good.
back.
It's all
But
good.
I mean, it's important to tell those stories,
It
particularly
is.
around the time when Jesse Jackson becomes an ancestor, right? So then you got that. You got. I said we're gonna spend this much time. But then you got the Black Pentecostal Holiness and Sanctified
Holiness.
Church resistances, right?
Yep.
Who were many people think it's just about tongues. It didn't start out like that, right? Folks like Seymour, folks like
Mason.
Mason, right? Were folks who, yes, had Azusa Street revivals, yes, holiness and sanctified church resistance, yes. Also, side note, Mason was a root worker,
Yes, he was.
right?
Yes, he
Mason was a
was.
root worker who knew how to work roots, right? So you got all of that. But they also were about justice-oriented types of activities, wherein they would merge and mix and syncretize, if you will, stuff from African traditional religions, hoodoo, Vodun, all of these types of pieces to engage in the work of justice. Ironically, however, with all of these churches beginning and some of these justice kinds of oriented movements. And watch this, as a general sphere, right? The black church begins, you said it earlier, Joe, its inception comes as a way for us to deal spiritually with what we got to face socially each and every day, right?
Yep.
So when people start talking about, why is there not a white church, black church, why is it just a church? No, our situation made it as such,
We
right?
needed our own.
We
We
needed
had
our own,
to be
which is
saved.
why even in 2008, when folks were coming after my pastor, and still coming after my pastor by disrespecting him, but when folks were coming after my pastor, right, and they see what's being preached on Sundays, they're like, "Was this what's happening every Sunday, each and every Sunday?" Right?
Absolutely.
It happens because we need our space because there are two different worlds, right? There are two
Absolutely.
different understandings, and that's why liturgy and justice and black church and justice are so very important for us to be able to connect those pieces because it started there, right? Get Gayrard Wilmore's book, Black Religion and Black Radicalism, if you don't have it.
Yes.
Absolutely
Classic.
necessary. Get
Classic.
L.H. Welch's book. Love Henry Welcher, former professor at the Interdenominational Theological
Black
Center.
Church of America.
The
history of the Black Church in America. Oh.
No, not that one. Something. A Way Out of Nowhere.
Yes, A Way Out of Nowhere. That's it.
A Way Out of Nowhere. That's the same book.
That's the same book.
A Way Out of Way. A Way Out of Nowhere. Right. But it traces all of these linkages. Right. And so I encourage you all to pick up those books to look and see, not just with denominations, way before denominations, going back to Africa, right? How some of these threads and some of these linkages come to who it is we understand ourselves now to be as a black church. Joe, talk to us about the Harlem Renaissance, man, as another era.
Yeah, so as we start to move through, kind of you're looking at Reconstruction, and after the Emancipation Proclamation, we move into this period known as the Harlem Renaissance. And in the book, Dr. Allen does an amazing job of looking at that, and I like the fact that she did recognize it really was an artistic movement, right? But
Mm.
the Black church had some parallel movements that were happening at the same time, right? So as a result of the Great Migration, we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, but as a result of the Great Migration, you have Black folks leaving the South and going north. And one of the places they were going was New York, in part because of the industrial movement that was happening, and the opportunity for living wage jobs. And so we have this melting pot of Black folks, not only from the South, but from the Caribbean, and from Haiti as well. And you have this artistic movement that's happening not only in art, but in music, as well. And it really is a movement of resistance, right? Because we're really establishing and self-identifying our identity, right? We can be who we are, right? We don't have to assimilate.
Unapologetic.
I'm sorry.
Unapologetically. I mean,
Yeah,
cut you off.
unapologetic, right? We don't have to assimilate into the dominant culture, right? We have amazing music. We have amazing art, right? We have these amazing things that we do as African Americans that we can identify and we can celebrate. So you have this major movement that is going on. So what Dr. Allen mentions a couple people, one of them being W.E.B. Du Bois, and his work as relates to the soul of Black folks in his book, and kind of the three assertions that he has in his book as relates to music and the Negro religion. There is no music like Black sacred music. Hard stop.
Whatsoever.
Again, there is no music like Black
Whatsoever.
sacred music. Hard stop.
Yep.
We can stop right there. There's
Yep.
nothing like it, right? Nothing like it. And Du Bois writes about that in the souls of Black folks. Then he also kind of talks about how the church is kind of the center of Negro life in the United States, and for a long time that has always been, right. Our churches were central to our communities. Matter of fact, if you read any history, right after the Emancipation Proclamation, we would build the church first and then build the community out
Right.
from the church, right? And then lastly, he just talks about how Negro religion kind of identifies itself with this idea of abolition, right? This idea of being free, this idea of being liberated was really at the core of our understanding of our religion, right? Specifically Christianity, right? We're rolling up on Easter and we all gonna hear he got up. Well, for us, historically, understanding he got up meant we are free too, right? Means that we are liberated too, right? We are not held down by chains, and we're not held down by oppression either, right? We are meant to be free, part of our understanding of Black religion. This kind of talks about Alan Locke, his work as professor at Howard University. Then obviously talks about musician and artist James Weldon Johnson, Go Bob, member of the greatest fraternity on the planet, and his work in writing what we now call the National Black Anthem, Lift Every Voice, and all this work that's being done during the Harlem Renaissance that has a parallel to Black religion as well. And then specifically in this time, she mentions a particular church and a particular pastor, right? Historic Abyssinian Baptist Church historic pastor Adam Clayton Powell Sr., and the work that they're doing in that church in the middle of Harlem as it relates to justice work, right? As it relates to being central in the community, as it relates to fighting for what's right for all the people in Harlem who are around the church, to ensure that somebody is speaking of justice. And it's in this time when she introduces this idea that Clayton Powell had, was this idea of applied Christianity, right? How do we apply? What's the practicum for our Christianity? What's the practicum for what we believe? What does that look like lived out, right? And that's why we do justice work, right? That is how we apply our Christianity, is doing justice work, right? Not just for some, but we do justice work for all, right? And that's kind of some of the things that came out of the Harlem Renaissance that are embedded in us that we are still living out today.
So one of the things coming through the Harlem Renaissance, you have these prophetic voices that are preaching justice, that are
Yep.
writing justice in terms of poetry and prose, that are doing all of these types of pieces, right? And you're
Yep.
bringing all of that through, and then what happens is something called the Great Migration, right?
Yes.
Great Migration, you have two main effects according to Dr. McLaurin. First, the churches in the South, where we have our own kinds of enclaves, right? The
Yep.
churches in the South experienced major decline because people were going up north to quote unquote promised land, right? And then secondly, there was the rise when they get up north of storefront churches.
Yes, sir.
Not these major, not a lot of whole major, right? But storefront churches are created so that people can be freer in worship than they would have felt in trying to merge into white churches and other, right? So another impact of this whole migration is that there's this collaboration between white factory owners and quote unquote cheap, safe labor and black pastors who were willing, watch this is very important because this still happens today. There was this compromising
Yes.
when black pastors curry favor with white factory owners in order to get jobs, right? There is this compromising of the prophetic voice.
Yes.
And so what you're doing is you're taking the edge off of your voice and calling stuff out and calling for alternative realities. And now you're going along to get along. And that began back in this migration piece, right? When you see that starting to happen, right?
Yep.
And so black religious and political leaders, as she says, as well as black academics examining the developments, were worried that watch this, the theologies, the practices, the political attitudes, and the social organizations of the religio-racial movements were undermined.
Yep.
Well, no, that they did undermine the case for African American full citizenship and full liberation, right? Because they were trying to curry favor,
Yep.
right? We've talked a number of different times about what political correctness is, right? A politics of respectability, right? And trying to say the right stuff so that we are not saying, and you know what it is. Woo, we seen it this weekend. It
Yeah, we
is,
did.
it is the awareness then and now. It is the awareness and the fear and the what's the word I want? It's being aware of the white gaze.
Yeah.
Because I am worried about what somebody else is going to think who may be able to determine the future.
Yep.
Right? I'm worried about what somebody else may say that may stop what I think I have going on, or that may quell some of the benefits I get from empire.
Yeah.
Right?
Bro,
let me say this real quick, Joe.
Yeah.
And we saw it this weekend, and the 44th president could not acknowledge his pastor because of the white gaze.
Even out of the White House.
Could not acknowledge Dr. Jeremiah Wright, even outside of his position as president.
Yep.
Worried about what may happen, white gaze, all of this good stuff. And so that's one level, right? But then you got other levels because you're thinking, okay, if I'm quiet about this, I'll get jobs. That's what was going on with the daily thing in Chicago. If I'm working, and so all of this works. And so watch the link. We're worried about the white gaze out here, but that mess around and we internalize it, and it affects us how we deal in our own churches in terms of our own practices, because we're worried about what somebody else is thinking.
Yes, sir.
And how that's going to affect how we get benefited or not.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Look. Let me give you a lived example, right? Let me give you a lived example. for Women's History Month, we do a preaching series here. Women preach the entire month of March. Dr. Baruro, Danny kicked it off for us. Danny was here. We had some non-African Americans who were visiting us in worship on that Sunday, and Danny said some things that were very prophetic and very true, right? And you could see those who were sitting in the pews, they felt a little uncomfortable. And I had to tell Dr. Baruro afterwards, you said what needed to be said, and what you said was truth. We are not changing for anybody. This is our refuge. This is our space. This is our space. And that we can never lose sight of our churches are our space.
Our space.
Our space.
And you are not entitled to tell us in our space. So that's when you talk about getting the freedom and liberation. Perfect example. I don't know if we showed this already or not. I think I showed it in my class, right? Toni Morrison is interviewed. Did I show this? Toni Morrison is interviewed by, I think the BBC.
Why she write about black stuff all the time?
Why you don't write about black stuff?
Yeah.
Why you don't write about white people?
Right.
She said, I have and I do. Yeah, but any significant matter? She said, you don't know how racist that question is. Here's what Toni Morrison said, which I believe is the essence of freedom, of liberation, and of justice. Toni Morrison said, I moved to the left. I'm paraphrasing. I can't say it like her. I moved to the left, as far as to the left as I could get. And I claimed that as central and waited for y'all to get over where I was at.
That's it.
Because that's my space. Now I welcome you on my space, but
Here's the other piece, bro. With that same thing, right? We also have, and we hear this all in the community all the time, right? Follow the money, right? Follow the money, right? Follow the money. And that's what Dr. Allen was talking about in the book. He's talking about pastors who are selling their congregation out for employment, right? And the cross and the lynching tree. Dr. Cohn writes about it. He writes about Reinhold Niebuhr in Detroit and how that was prevalent in Detroit because of the auto industry, right? Not only did you have Ford and GM, but you had all these other side businesses that need labor, right? That fed in the GM and Ford. And so you had all these folks going to black churches, working with pastors to get cheap labor, and the pastors' pockets were getting filled, and the church's coffer was getting filled, right? I ain't gonna say no names, but there's some questions about somebody on the south side of Chicago right now who's getting a whole lot of money to build a very nice community center, but there's a lot of questions about all the money he's getting and how it's quieting his voice. I ain't gonna say no names. I ain't gonna say no names. But we watch it happen, right? We watch it happen, right? Follow the money. And typically, when folks want to give our churches money that don't look like us, there's strings attached.
Very much so.
There's strings attached. It's strings attached.
So we got to keep in mind, and this is as we move toward civil rights movement and justice and all that type of stuff. We want to talk about the Y.T. Walker piece. The time is flying. It's already 7:15.
I know.
But when you move toward the civil rights movement, one of the things you got to think about is how much, or better yet, how little, as we said earlier, Amos Brown said, it was only 3% who were dealing with justice outside. Now, watch the irony. Watch the irony. Because while then and now, you're dealing with calling for justice on the outside, women still can't preach on the inside. Liturgically.
Right.
Women can be cooking in the kitchen or whatever, but women can't be in important leadership positions, much less pastors. And even if you go back to like Seymour and Mason and them, they had black women pastors, right? In Kojic in some of those areas, right? So we got to look at this internal dichotomy that we have internalized, Marcus Small says, because we've internalized these toxic theologies, right? Theologies that, tell us we're filthy rags, but then you start, no. And so keeping coming up with the civil rights movement, that can be critiqued there. From even those who helped King, people don't give Ella Baker enough credit for what she did in terms of not only SCLC, but also in terms of core and SNCC, right? You have
Diane
you
Nash.
have Diane Nash, right? You can't so this whole matter of I think it's very important for us as we are crafting our liturgies and now even sometimes reforming our liturgies. We cannot be those who call for something on outside that we're not engaging in on the inside,
Yes,
right?
sir.
That's a lack of integrity.
Yes,
That's
sir.
a lack of integrity, and God is not pleased. And God is not pleased. So we got civil rights movement, NAACP, got all of these different pieces, but we have one person who was one of Dr. King's kind of lieutenants,
Yep.
uh, Dr. Wyatt T. Walker,
Walker. Yes, sir.
pastor of
Yes,
Hillsdale
sir.
Baptist Church in Petersburg, Virginia.
Yes, sir.
Um, and Walker walks us through reasons why the church and clergy had to be involved for the struggle for civil rights then, and I dare say now.
I agree.
So you want to
100%.
run us through those?
Yeah, let's look at those, and we're gonna give them a little Bible. We just got the 15-minute warning, so we're gonna run through these really quick, and then we gotta give them a little Bible. Gotta give them some Bible. I don't need my mama coming after me talking about we ain't getting no Bible tonight. So
No,
why T Walker talks about the 7 reasons why churches should be a part of the civil rights movement, and I think we would both agree that this is part of the reason why churches need to be part of justice movements in the present time that we're living in today, right? I think it fits civil rights movement, and 60, 70, 80 years later, I think it still fits, right? So first of all, because of the proximity of our churches, right? Our churches typically are located centrally in our communities, and that makes them very accessible and makes them very easy to be the hub of movements out into the community,
can I
right?
say something real quick
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that
yeah,
though?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So when Danielle and I do our trainings with regard to social justice
Mhm.
ministries in the local church, one of the things we say, because people say, well, where do I start? How do I start? Da, da. If you start with the 4 blocks to the north, south, east, and west of where your church is, what are the issues affecting right there? And you start right there. If it's homelessness, we start in homelessness.
Dig in.
If it's hunger, we start in hunger. Right? So you started right there, right where you are. You ain't got to look far.
Mm-mm.
And if this church does what it's supposed to do here, another church on another corner, that's when you start to coalesce and build relationship and collaboration. Go ahead, man. I ain't gonna cut you off.
Yep. For those from New Hope who are on, that should sound familiar. Here we go. Here we go. The members have a regular cadence, right? You have this weekly gathering that happens, right? So there's this very easy way to share information because you have everybody in one place on a regular cadence, which makes also sharing information, planning, and then executing a lot easier because you already have a cadence
Right.
of the people of getting together. And let's be honest, most churches, if they're preaching Jesus, most churches should be concerned about the needs of other people, right? If you're not concerned, I said most, if you're not concerned about the needs of other people, then I question if you're preaching Jesus, right? If you're only concerned about the people within the 4 walls of your church, I question if you're preaching Jesus. And you say, why do you question that? Because if you do a time study of Jesus, he spent more time outside of the church than he did in the church. And when he was in the church, he was tearing it up. But we'll save that for another day. Here it is. Churches also, when you think about the membership of the church, most churches are intergenerational. So what we're saying is it spans across many ages,
Yeah.
and you also have diversity of age and economics and education and class, and you're bringing all those things together, right? If the church is being done right, it has a way of eliminating and getting rid of all of those things that divide us and bring us together for the work of justice, right? Churches oftentimes have the resources and the techniques to motivate people to volunteer, right? When we think about our churches, most of what we do on a weekly basis is done by volunteers, right? So if it's the ushers, if it's the deacons, whatever it is, most of those folks are volunteers, and they have an understanding of what volunteerism is and how we can also take that model and
So,
move it outside the church.
let me add something to that real
Yeah,
quick
yeah.
as well. Because what churches do, what churches have, I interviewed Earl Fisher and Melva Sampson and Heber Brown when he was pastoring. And what all of them agreed upon is that when you are pastoring, or have, as Dr. Melba does, a digital
Hmm.
community, you have organized people already, right? And the big thing about justice is we ain't outworked, we out organized, and so you
That's
have an
it.
organized. And what I believe Earl and he were stated is that you can use sermons and teaching and all of that as organization tools
Absolutely.
about how it is that we engage, right? So you have organization right here and right now in order to be able to move stuff.
Yep. To that point, Father Flager, man, 10, 15 years ago, preached at New Hope. I'll never forget the analogy that he used. He said, Sunday service is the football huddle. We huddle together, and then we call the play, and then during the week we go out and execute the play.
Play.
Right?
Yep.
Man, that is just a
That
perfect,
imagery.
yeah, that's a perfect understanding of what Sunday organizing looks like, and then what we go out of the side of the four walls to do as well. Pastors typically have flexible schedules so they can attend meetings and do organizing work, typically because they're not tied to another job outside of the church. We know in 2026 that may not be the case, as many of us are now bivocational. Conversation for
Vocation.
yep, conversation for another day.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. And then also talks about intentionally with the church as well when we talk about our music, right? And how intentional that is, and what we can sing when we come together, and what we can sing when we're out doing that work, right? All of that is part of the act of justice and really fighting against oppression. And that's why I believe, and I agree with Reverend Walker, that the church should be central to justice work.
Yeah, man. We only got a few minutes left.
Oh,
I do before we go to the
yep,
script.
yep, yep.
Go and get the script. Go and get the scripture.
I got it.
And,
I got it. I
and
got it.
I
Go
want
ahead.
to say, one kind of piece that I hope lands with this, lands with us in this, right? Um, One, we cannot allow our voices to be compromised by those who are outside and who don't mean us no good, no way. Right? That's number one. Number two, I think we've been saying this throughout. We got to be careful of the theologies, ideologies, sociologies, anthropologies, all of those types of pieces that we internalize that are antithetical to our liberation and freedom.
Yes, sir.
And number three, we cannot be those who call for justice on the outside and not do justice in terms of our liturgical practices, in terms of our organizational practices, in terms of our sociological practices on the inside of the church. That is absolutely unethical, and it will serve to hurt us more than will hurt us, than it will to help us. And so I want to encourage us, if we're watching, whether you are in leadership or whether you are in lay, to examine your liturgical practices, to examine your not only liturgical practices, but examine your organizational practices, examine all the way even down to your organizational charts, right? What are the practices that we have in place to ensure that this place is not only safe, but it's also a subversive space that engages in bringing down whatever would cause black and brown and poor and outcast people to be um, further handcuffed and not liberated. We got to be not only safe spaces, we got to be revolutionary spaces.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Really quick, little Bible from the prophet Isaiah. Prophet Isaiah, the first chapter, 17th verse. Isaiah was a prophet to the people. Isaiah was a prophet to those in positions of power. Went talked to kings, how they were treating the people as well. He writes this in the 17th verse. Learn to do right, seek justice, encourage the oppressed, defend the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow.
Yep.
In other words, those who are the most vulnerable in our communities are the ones that we should be working and giving voice to and giving hand to.
Yep.
That's Bible.
That's Bible.
That's Bible.
Whether you are inside of the church or outside of the church, preferably both.
Amen.
There's a difference between charity and justice. Justice is right relationships and the promotion thereof in terms of practices and policies. Charity is responding to a need. Justice is making sure that need ain't needed in the first place. So that's
Absolutely.
what we engage in. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dr.
Brother,
Only, we
it
got any
has been,
questions, comments, concerns on the ether way, in the words of Michael Henderson?
Good evening,
anything on the chat line?
Simone, Dr. Mitchell. One question that came through the chat. What can the community do to help some of us who remain uncomfortable and conditioned by the white gaze?
Wow.
Now we're gonna
Wow.
be here a whole nother hour.
Right. We're gonna be here a while.
You want to go first, or you want me to go?
You go first. You go first. You go first.
I should have just said you go first. I think my thoughts are legion. For those of us who are still conditioned by the white gaze, some of us, what your mama say? Some people don't believe fat meat greasy.
No, they don't.
And it takes sometimes bumping our heads, as we've all learned in life, to learn that that gaze does not do us well. That it's what Baby Suggs said in Beloved. Love your hands, because yonder down there they don't love your hands. Marcus Smart will put it like this: we are not on the team. Right? Yonder down there, they don't love your feet. Smile, because they don't love your smile. So until some of that is internalized and people see that, so that's one piece. The other side of it is when they do bump their head, they have to have a community that welcomes them.
Thank you, sir.
Right? Welcomes them without being like, I told you so. I told you. No, welcome them. Maybe 10, maybe 5, maybe a little time down the line, you can joke like, I joke with Joe that he pledged the wrong fraternity. So we can do that a little bit along the line. I wouldn't do it when I first met him, but now that I know him, I can absolutely say that he was, too late and unable to be a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, much less part of the. I'm sorry. But yeah. So I think he has to have a community. We have to be community where folks can come. So I think that's sometimes people got to bump their heads, and at the same time, we keep being faithful to what it is that we've been called to do.
Yep. I would just add this behind you, bro. One of the things I will always love about the Nation of Islam is how important self-identity and self-love was to that let me say that is to that organization, right? They start by helping you love yourself, right? They start by helping you love the beautiful black skin that God has blessed you with, right? And I think the sooner we all understand the color of our skin is a blessing and not a curse, right? The farther we move away from needing and being concerned about a white gaze, right? And to your point, our community, specifically our churches, you should hear something on a regular basis where you go to church about your blackness being beautiful. On a regular cadence, you should hear that, right? On a regular cadence, right? You should hear about your intelligence. You should hear about your gifting. You should hear about the amazing, rich history and heritage that you are a part of, right? When you start to hear that on a regular basis, it really empowers you. And when you love yourself, you don't really care about what other people have to say. Absolutely. Right? It's not even something you can concern yourself with, right?
Yeah, I completely agree, man. We're gonna turn it back over to Danny. Before we do that, I just want to say again to my line brothers, no marks of the new Umoja, spring 1992. Happy Alpha Versary, brothers.
Bro, you started with that. You got to end with that too?
Yeah. Yes.
Please,
yes.
Brother.
The answer is yes. The answer is yes.
Get it out your system, man.
Look, unapologetically, yes.
All right, get it out your
our
system.
Space, our line. You just talked about our space, our line. So I said that.
Your day, man. Have your day. I ain't going to intrude. Have your day.
Dr. Danny.
Yes.
How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful.
Good.
I wish I went to the seven hills of the Um, Thank you so much, Pastor Williams and Pastor Mitchell, for guiding us through such a rich conversation this evening. And thank you to all of you for joining. Thank you for your voices. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your honesty and authenticity in this space. Chapter 7 reminds us that the Black church has never been a place of just worship. It has been a place of organizing, a place of healing, a place of resistance. From the denominations born in the Reconstruction era to the pews that launched the Civil Rights Movement, liturgy and justice have always been intertwined in our tradition. So, here's what we'd like for you to carry into this week. Two reflections. First, please consider your own church's worship, doctrine, and theology and ask yourself, what is our commitment to justice? Are we participating in applied Christianity? What have I always questioned but never said out loud? As Dr. Allen reminds us, if we can answer for ourselves, we ought to be able to say what we know. Second, we want to invite you to examine where our worship context could be more justice oriented. Think about who is centered in your liturgy. Age, gender, artistic expression, maybe? Could dance or spoken word, poetry, or other forms of creative witness expand how our communities encounter God and respond to the world? Before we go, family, we want to ask you to complete tonight's post-session survey. Your reflections aren't just feedback, but they're data that helps us build something lasting. The link is in the chat and will be posted on each of our church's social media. If you haven't picked up this book by Dr. Lisa Allen McLaurin entitled A Womanist Liturgical Theology, we want to invite you to do so because it will certainly deepen your learning for how we are learning and what we are studying during this amazing Outliers Collective Bible Study series. Next week, we're even more excited to move into Chapter 8, The Unbroken Circle, facilitated by Pastor William Marcus Small and Pastor Reginald Williams. You won't want to miss next week. Until next week, may your worship be a doorway to justice, and may your justice be an act of worship. Good night, family.